Hello, I'm Daniela. In today's slow stitching video, we're going to continue with our charming birds. In the first video, I showed the process of creating a bird from start to finish with fabric and embroidery floss. In today's video, we're going to take a look at the wings and make 6 variations using fabric. Now we'll still use the template that we made in the first video, but these are just minor variations, ways to give character and personality to your charming bird. So let's get started. So I have here a piece of fabric with 6 bird bodies on them. And what I'm going to do is sew the wings on them in just different formations, just to give you some ideas for different wings. And then we'll come back and do the beaks and the tails as well. But we'll start today with the wings. Now I've stitched all the bodies down, leaving the tails up a little bit so that I can tuck the tails in when it's time to stitch the tails. And I left a little gap, 1/4 of an inch, so that if I wanted to tuck the wings, I have it there as well. I'm going to move the camera closer to the pieces as we work on them, and then at the end I'll show you all the completed pieces, the bodies with their wings. So in the original video, we stitched this wing up top here, just on the upper side of the body, and that's a very effective piece. I wanted to show you additional variations to that, and it's using the same template that we made for the wing, just flipping it around according to whichever direction the bird is facing. So here I took 2 versions of that wing because I want to make 2 wings showing. Now only one wing will be 100% showing, and the other wing will just be the part sticking out from the back. So to do that, I take the wing and just kind of figure out where I want to place them. And it doesn't matter, it's however I want to place them. And then, because I want it to look like it's coming from the other side of the body, I'll just sketch here the line and then cut that out so that I can tuck that in. So I've cut that wing apart, and I can tuck it here underneath that body. And then for this one, I can just put it on wherever I want, just like that. And now I'll pin them into place and stitch them down. So I'll start by stitching this full wing. I have my thread and the color that I want to use that matches the wing, but of course you can use any color that you'd like. If you want to use a contrasting color, that's perfectly fine. And I'm going to start here at the very end of the wing. I'm just going to do a straight stitch, and again, feel free to vary it to make it your own. So use whatever stitch you like. I like the straight stitch, and I tend to do small stitches because this way I can make the curves that we see here in this wing. So now I keep my stitches approximately 1/4 of an inch from the end of the fabric. I don't want to go too close to the fabric. If I go too close to the fabric, it's more likely to fray. You could always use some fusible webbing to hold your wings down as well, and then just add stitches for decorative purposes. But I like to use the stitching. I don't mind the fabric if it wrinkles or it comes up from where I'm sewing. I think that just adds to the fact that it looks hand stitched. But of course, that's a choice that you have to make and decide what you like with that. I like the smaller stitches on the curves because that way the curve looks soft and normal. If you use larger stitches, it looks a little more angular. And unless that's the look you're going for, I find that the soft, shorter stitches are a little more effective. Again, I don't want the stitches to compete with our overall image of the bird. I just want them to enhance it. And that's why I chose that color, because it sort of fades in the background, but it just adds a little texture, that pink, right on that pink fabric. So I'll just sew a couple more stitches here, and I can remove that pin. And that pin is, after it's removed, is just one less pin to stick me with. So now from here, I can knot off my fabric and just snip it. It just makes it a little easier for me to work with it that way. So then I'll reknot my thread, and I'm just going to sew I'll remove the pin at first. I'm just going to sew the perimeter just like I did on this wing over here. And I'm going to start right out in front of where the two fabrics meet and overlap. Again, I'm using the smaller stitches. This shouldn't take too long. Now if you want, you can always sew these wings on before you sew the body on. And you wouldn't even have to cut this fabric to fit. You could just sew the wing underneath that body fabric. I'm going to leave it just like this. I don't think it's going to come out. If I was concerned of it coming out, I think I would get this greenish thread and just sew a few stitches to hold it down. But I'm quite happy with the way this looks, just like this. I'll knot off the back, trim my thread, and I have my first set of wings on my bird. Now for my second variation, I want that wing to be right in the center of the bird. Now I'm going to cut the wing down just because I like the smaller wing when it's in the center. So I'm just going to trim a little bit off around the edge, maybe 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch, somewhere around there. And if you want to make it pointy, you can make it pointy. I like the rounded edge. So I'm just going to take it and set it down kind of close to the tail, but I like the stitching showing from my body. So then I'll just take a pin it in position, and just sew around that edge. And I'll just go all the way around with little stitches. Now by going around the stitches, I am still using that pink color, the same color as the wing, but if you wanted more contrast, you can use that green color or even introduce another color. If you introduced another color, you could use it on the tail or on the beak, or just introduce a third color just to make it even more colorful. So that's a totally different effect, and it's very interesting. And that's the beauty of this technique, is you really add a lot of personalization and interest to your bird with all the different variations that you make to just the simple template of the body and the wing that I show in the first video. So I'll knot the thread, remove the pin, and I have my second wing on my second bird complete. So now for the third bird, what I want to do is have the wing, and it can be either in the center or up top or on the bottom, but I want to take a piece of batting and put it underneath where I'm going to put my wing, and that just stuffs it. If I didn't want to use batting, I could use another piece of fabric, like maybe something quilted, and that will give an interesting effect. Now to do this, I cut my piece of batting considerably smaller than my wing, maybe 1/4 inch all the way around. And I'm just going to set it down where I want it. I'm going to cover a little bit of that stitching, but I want some of the stitching showing at the end here, so I'll move it a little bit towards the front. I'll pin it into place, and then I'll take my thread and stitch all around in the same fashion that I've done before. I make my stitches, and then I'm just going to stitch all the way around the wing, just like I did in previous versions. And when I stitch around, I just stitch just barely outside that batting. So this way I might be stitching through the batting, but mostly I'm stitching through the fabric, and this will hold the batting into place as well as stitch that wing down decoratively. So I'll stitch all the way around and show you the results. So here's the result of a little puffy wing. I think it's interesting that it adds just a little bit of dimension. If you wanted more dimension, you just continue to add more layers of the batting. For our next wing, we're just going to add it below the bird, so it looks like it's in flight. This would be a cute one to add another wing up top as well. But just to add it below the bird, I just place it where I want it, add a pin, and again, I stitch around using whatever size stitches I want. I start equally from the 1/4 inch or so of the edge, and just continue all the way around. And I'll show you this when it's complete. So now for our next bird, we're going to do the wing, but I want to make it considerably smaller. So I'm going to take the wing that I cut and just trim around it even further, just to make it a cute little wing. You can also just as easily make it really large, just to exaggerate that little wing, and then you can decide where you want to put it. And I just think that looks so precious and cute. So once again, I'll stitch around the edge. I'm not even going to put a pin in this one. I'm just going to put a few stitches in to hold it in place. And then I'll show you the results. And so there we have a super tiny wing on our bird's body. Now for the last one, we're going to take our wing, and again you can use any of the placements that we used up above, but I want to make layers. So you can layer any type of fabric you want on it, lace, transparent fabric like maybe a tulle. I'm just going to layer different pieces of the fabric that we've already used. And I just think that adds a little dimension, a little height, and a little bit more interest. So you can decide just to layer 2 pieces, or consider layering 3 if you like. I particularly like the 2 pieces. So I'm just going to set it down like this. I'll take my green thread this time, and I'm just going to stitch around the border of that center piece. So I'll take a pin, hold it in place, and stitch around the border. And if I don't think that's enough, if I think it doesn't look proper or I don't like the color scheme, then I'll take my pink and stitch around that as well. But we'll start just with this little green and see from there where it goes and then assess it. So I'll finish stitching around and then we can make our decision. So there we have our stitched wing. I do think it needs that pink stitching around the border, so I'll do that and then we'll take another look. Again, I just want my stitches to go in between this pink layer and that center fabric. And so there I have the completed wing with the 2 rows of stitching, and I always tend to think that additional stitching is better and more effective. So now let's take a look at all of the 6 variations plus the original. So here's the original bird that we created in the first video, and here are 6 additional variations just using the wing. In the future videos, I'll show you variations on the beak as well as the tail. I just think each variation really brings the piece to life. And something as simple as the direction of the wing makes the bird appear like it's flying or mid-flight, or maybe flying quickly. So it's kind of a fun little effect. They become a little more whimsical with the additional touches, and I'm sure there are additional ways that you can come up with to create your wings on your bird. So I hope you found these variations on the wings helpful, inspired you to create your own, and therefore adding more personality to your birds. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me today.